You leave one relationship and swear you will never live that kind of confusion again. Then a few months later, it shows up at work. Different faces, different language, same pressure. Or maybe it happens another way. You organize your schedule, clean up your habits, get more serious, more disciplined, more careful. But the same heaviness still appears, the same self-doubt, the same invisible friction, the same sense that life keeps pressing on the same bruise from different directions. And that is where most people lose years. Because when the same problem appears in different parts of your life, you usually treat each appearance like a separate event. One bad boss, one difficult partner, one weak phase, one mistake in timing, one flaw in your character. But if you keep doing that, you stay busy at the surface while the deeper pattern stays untouched. By the end of this video, you'll see why one pattern can show up across work, relationships, identity, and inner life without being 4 different problems. You'll see what correspondence actually means in practice. And more importantly, you'll see why this is good news. Because if one pattern is repeating everywhere, then you do not need to fix everything. You need to find the template. Here is the simplest way to say it. A repeated pattern across different areas of life is usually one inner law wearing different clothes, not one curse, not 4 unrelated failures, one template. The ancient formula is famous because it is simple. What happens on one level tends to echo on another, not because everything is identical, but because the same force can express itself through different materials. Take one example. A man feels unseen in his relationship. He over-explains, over-gives, waits too long to say what hurts, then explodes when the pressure gets too high. He thinks the problem is love. Then he goes to work and does the same thing with authority. He stays silent too long, accepts too much, tries to earn basic respect by being useful, then resentment builds. Then comes the sharp email, the withdrawal, or the quiet collapse. Now the same man goes inward. Alone, he talks to himself the same way. He delays what matters, bargains with his own standards, lets small violations pass, then suddenly swings into harsh self-judgment. 3 scenes: relationship, work, inner life. Most people call that bad luck, bad people, or a complicated personality. But look more closely. The pattern is not romance. The pattern is not career. The pattern is not mood. The pattern is self-betrayal under pressure. That is correspondence. And once you see it, a strange relief appears. Because life is no longer attacking you from 4 directions. It is showing you one thing repeatedly until it becomes visible. Now let me make this even sharper. The repeated pattern is rarely in the storyline. It is in the structure. Not they always leave. Not my bosses are always unfair. Not I keep losing motivation. Those are stories. The structure sits underneath them. Maybe the real structure is this. You keep negotiating with what should have been clear. You keep waiting too long to act. You keep hoping the outer world will confirm what you have not yet confirmed inwardly. Same structure, different stage. Here is the first turning point. When the same lesson shows up everywhere, life is not multiplying your burden. It is simplifying your diagnosis. That matters, because the mind usually does the opposite. It says, now I have 4 problems. My relationship is messy. My work is draining. My habits are unstable. My inner world is noisy. No, maybe you have one pattern and it has reached 4 surfaces. Quick question. Where in your life do you keep seeing the same tone in different forms? Not the same event. The same tone. The same chasing. The same collapse. The same bargaining. The same tightening. The same hunger for permission. The same fear of conflict. The same need to be chosen before you can stand up straight. That tone is closer to the truth than the storyline. And here's why this matters so much. As long as you fight each reflection separately, you stay passive. You keep rearranging people, schedules, roles, environments. But once you see the template, you become active again. You stop asking, why does this keep happening to me in so many areas? And you start asking, what is the same thing in me that each area is revealing? That is a very different posture. It is quieter, cleaner, more powerful. And we are halfway through now, so let's make the path visible. So far, we have done one thing. We separated the repeated pattern from the repeated story. Next comes the part that changes everything. Why most people still miss the pattern even when it is right in front of them. They miss it because they are hypnotized by scale. They think the inner world is private, the relationship is emotional, the workplace is practical, and the body is physical. So when something repeats across them, it feels impossible that one law could be involved. But correspondence says the opposite. Different planes, same signature. A small example makes this easier. Someone lives in constant internal clutter, half decisions, unfinished thoughts, avoided conversations, emotional residue everywhere. Sooner or later, that same lack of order appears outwardly. Their room gets harder to manage. Their calendar fills with vague obligations. Their relationships become murky. Their speech becomes less exact. Their body starts carrying more tension. Now listen carefully. This does not mean every outer disorder is caused by some magical moral failure. It means that what is tolerated inwardly tends to seek expression outwardly. And the reverse is also true. When a person becomes inwardly cleaner, not perfect, just cleaner, you usually see it elsewhere too. Speech becomes more precise. Choices become less theatrical. Relationships become less crowded. Time becomes easier to read. The body carries less contradiction. Same law, different levels. This is why deep change often feels smaller than people expect at first. Because the real shift is not, I fixed my whole life. The real shift is, I stopped feeding the template. And then the echoes begin to change. Not instantly, not dramatically, but faithfully. That is the second turning point. You do not need to control every reflection. You need to stop reproducing the pattern that is generating them. That is why the mirror matters. Not to shame you, not to trap you in endless self-analysis, but to return you to the place where change actually has leverage. The surface is noisy. The template is quiet. The surface blames. The template reveals. The surface says, different problem again. The template says, same law, new costume. So if life has felt repetitive lately, let this ease you instead of discouraging you. You may be much closer to clarity than you think. Because repetition is not always punishment. Sometimes repetition is mercy. It is life making the pattern large enough to be seen. And once it is seen, you no longer have to solve 10 separate dramas. You can begin where the line actually starts. One honest recognition, one pattern named correctly, one place where you stop calling the reflection the cause. That is the bascule. Stop fighting the costume. Read the template. If you do that, work becomes more legible. Relationships become more honest. Your inner life becomes less chaotic. Not because the world suddenly obeys you, but because you are no longer negotiating with symptoms while the source keeps running. And that is the freeing part. The same pattern shows up everywhere for one reason, so you can finally see it once.